Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. It's been a little while, but I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with Zach Moreth, and we're here to talk a little bit of Ole Miss sports of the recent couple of days, really just for Ole Miss basketball. Really, that's what's going on in the heat of the moment right now, Zach. Not a lot going on with football. Portal's kind of calmed down a little bit since the national championship game has been over with. Probably a lot of upset Ole Miss fans with me mentioning that one again. Had to hear that in the back of your head. If you know, you know. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting portal season in the next portal cycle for Ole Miss, and then obviously bringing in all the recruits they brought in. Zach, they're 0.5 of a point away from that number one spot behind LSU and being the number one ranked portal team again. Trey Wallace, Harrison Wallace, Penn State receiver, recent guy, pretty big time receiver, a guy that you're probably going to see in that starting rotation for Ole Miss come springtime in those spring practices, and we'll see where he's at come fall with this receiver room. It pretty much looks pretty stacked for Austin Simmons right now, don't you say, Zach?
I think a lot of people are underdoing, just how successful this portal class was, Cam. And I think that starts with the idea of getting Prince Umamniel and Walter Nolan and all of these stud players in last year's class. But, the end reality is that you can't have that approach to every single year, especially when you have so many players who have, several years of eligibility. You want to look at the defensive line, Cam Franklin, Will Eccles, Jam Brown, Centarian Perkins. These are dudes who are going to be at Ole Miss for 1 or 2 years. You look at the offensive side of the ball, Austin Simmons, a bunch of offensive linemen coming up. Some of the young wide receivers are up and coming. So people got to understand that Ole Miss isn't going to drop, 20 million on this roster to go win the national championship every year. Obviously, the national championship is the goal in mind, but you need to have some development there. And they've done that. You look at, Trey Wallace, the wide receiver from Penn State, the tight end from Arkansas. I really enjoy the player from Oklahoma State, Stribling. I know he's a one-year guy, but that's a veteran who can lead these younger receivers. So I think Lane did a nice job of, mixing and matching there with the vets and also the younger players at the same time, because this team can surprise a lot of people. It can play worse than people think. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to suit up for another one of those last dance type runs in 2026. And again, I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that Ole Miss isn't trying to win as many games as possible in 25. Fans just need to realize that roster is different. There are guys who are a lot younger versus a team who essentially at every starting position had 1 year of eligibility in 2024. So it's different, but Trey Wallace is a hell of a player, Cam. He comes from an offense which doesn't pass a lot. If I'm remembering correctly, Drew Aller and Penn State didn't find their wide receivers once in their last playoff game. That's pretty difficult to do. So you put him in an offense led by Lane Kiffin and Austin Simmons, who'd love to rip that ball down the field. I think his stats, which are already pretty decent with 720 receiving yards on 46 receptions, they're going to explode a little bit, and this kid's going to be an NFL prospect before we know it. So very exciting pickup nonetheless, Cam.
Absolutely, and it's gonna be exciting to see who's gonna be that number one target for Austin Simmons come springtime. I feel like that's when we'll probably see at least a little bit of what Simmons is going to be looking for in the fall the most. And it seems like it's going to be Caden Lee, considering the connection they had when Simmons was in the game last year, the connection that Dart had with Lee just throughout the season when other receivers went down. But you mentioned Hassan Stribling, 1 year guy. Seems like he's got that Trey Harris type of ability where he's a bigger guy. He's going to be a deep ball threat. And you throw it up to him, get him in the red zone. You throw him one up in the red zone, and he comes down with it. And you also got Caleb Odom, a big receiver who Ole Miss really hasn't had a guy like that since, I guess you could say, DK Metcalf. And if Simmons and the offense could use Caleb Odom correctly, that's another weapon for Simmons in this Ole Miss offense. And I think just to your point on Trey Wallace, not a lot of passing at that Penn State University in that offense, but it's just when you're coming to the SEC, when you're coming to a program like Ole Miss in a passing style, pro style offense where they're going to be moving the ball more. And I say pro style now because I guess the more traditional pro style offense, I formation under center, which we still do see a lot of in the NFL. But most of the NFL is passing now. A lot of down in the passing this year for the NFL, but it seems like that's what the NFL model is moving towards. These schools like Ole Miss. I mean, Jackson Dart's boosted in the rankings for these past couple of months for the NFL. And a lot of people in the past say Ole Miss was a system offense, a system school where the quarterbacks don't really develop as much. So I think this offense has a really big upside next year. This receiver room seems like it's complete. Obviously, two really good tight ends in Daquan Wright and Luke Haas too. So I mean, that's two really good weapons. They'll figure out the running back room, and I think it has plenty of weapons to use next year for Lane Kiffin and an offense. So I think this Ole Miss team is heading in the right direction next year. Like you said, they could suit up for a last dance type of season again in 2026 if Simmons decides to come back for another year and other guys decide to come back for that last dance. But I think next year they're going to surprise some people, maybe not to the best ability they were this year. Obviously, that defense for Ole Miss was very elite, and it's going to be very hard to replicate that, especially with a very young secondary next year. But there's still room to work on that, still room to add some pieces. And obviously, heading into the spring, these guys will get to finally suit up together and play together as a new team. Into your little discussion, a little more in discussion about development. I think that's like going back to date with a couple months ago. We talked about it on here on the podcast. Lane Kiffin wants to get more into that high school role, and we saw that this year in the high school class. And I think that's what you, back to your point about saying people kind of downgraded this transfer class a little bit. I think people need to back off a little bit on the coaches on that. They did the best of their ability to this point. Of course, you probably would like to see a couple more offensive linemen in there, maybe a couple more DBs in there, but there's still more time to add players. There's still more time to develop some of these young guys who were really good prospects in the recent years for Pete Golden, and then guys coming in this year to this high school class. And I think that's what Pete Golden and Lane Kiffin are trying to work towards more, just like they talked about a couple months ago at the end of the season, developing into those high school classes.
Yeah, and I want to give a little insight here, kind of a spin zone, if you will, to the mindset of the current Ole Miss fan. As Cam and I are both Ole Miss guys, you know that. But instead of thinking, oh my gosh, this portal class is worse, this roster is full of young players, South Carolina, Florida, they're going to come into Vaught-Hemingway, get a win. We're not going to beat LSU. You can say all these negative things, but I think the approach to the season has to be different if you're a fan, right? And we were talking about it before the podcast, but we don't know who's going to be lined up where in spring ball. We're excited to see these things. We're excited to watch Mielen's brother and see if he can come close to where his brother was at and potentially becoming a first-round draft pick in this April. We're excited to watch the tight end attack, which really struggled last season, but now you have a more athletic, versatile room with Daquan Wright and Luke Haas from Arkansas. We're very, very eager to see what's going on with the running back room. Shakai Mills-Knight, is he going to play? Is he going to be the next type of Quinshon Judkins? Is Logan Diggs going to come off his injury and be elite like he was at LSU? And then Kewan Lacey from Missouri. So there's unanswered questions. A lot of people think that's a bad thing. I think it could potentially be a great thing and lead this Ole Miss team to the promised land and really shock some people for next fall. But, we have a lot of time before that. I'm sure there's going to be more portal additions. But I want fans to, try and look at the season under a new lens and understand that Ole Miss is going to be competitive, and Lane Kiffin has done a nice job assembling that combination between both, transfer portal class and high school camp.
Absolutely, and it's the off season. It's hard to push football into the past, especially as an SEC fan, especially as a big time college football fan. It's hard to push that into that last season that was bitter into the past and move on. But there's a lot to come for this Ole Miss team. There's a lot to come in 2025 and in 2026 and the years to come for this Ole Miss team. I think Austin Simmons is the real deal. A lot of people seem to think that as well. And I think this team's in really good hands. This program's in really good hands. As long as they can keep this core together that they have right now with Simmons, with the rest of the offense. I mean, it seems like they're not getting rid of any of the coaching staff at this point. So it seems like they're ready to roll for the next year, and we'll see who they roll out there in the spring when that time comes. We're going to move a little bit into some basketball for you guys, a little bit more of a recent sports update for Ole Miss about what's going on. The women's basketball team, Team 50, Coach O, they played on this past Sunday in the Hump against Mississippi State. Went in there and won 71-63 the day after the men's team lost in Starkville. Maddie Scott dropped 30 points, a career high for her in that game. I think that was her 9th time or her 8th time playing Mississippi State in her career at Ole Miss, which is which is insane. So I mean, you play your rival that many times. Obviously, you could tell in that game how much Maddie Scott wanted to win that game. You could tell that she wanted to be the ones with the ball in her hand at those big moments, and she delivered for them. Ole Miss got into a hole in the beginning of that game, just like the men's team did early in the game against State. In the opposite way, the women's team got out of it a little bit quicker and were able to get a lead before going into the half. And I think that was the big thing for them going into that game. Well, throughout the course of that game is having the lead at halftime and being able to build on that after halftime. Sierra Chinu also had 9 steals, career high for her. She's been all over the place defensively in the SEC. It seems like you look at a box score, she's got 5+ steals every game. And if you just go out there and watch her play, her play says it all. She moves a little bit differently than girls her age out there on the floor. And you can just tell that she's one of the top freshmen in the country. I've heard Coach Yo talk about it. You heard other players on the team talk about it. They're trying to push for Sierra to get the freshman of the year in the SEC. And they're going to try to keep giving her the ball and giving her more opportunities to allow that to happen. But it seems like she's good on her own. She's making a name for herself right now in college basketball, and I think that's pretty big for this Team 50 team right now.
This felt like kind of a make or break game, Cam. You know, you've struggled a little bit. You just beat Florida by a great deal, but to go into State and get that win, and for Maddie Scott to say, you know what, I'm here. I haven't had the best season, but I'm going to go drop a 30 bomb on my rival. You know, that says a lot, and it was big for her to step up in that way. And now you have a chance. You know, we said it before the podcast, but the team really doesn't have a marquee win yet. So with Texas coming into town on Sunday, you really have an opportunity to show that you can compete with the best. You know, this is a Texas team who beat a top 10 Maryland by almost 40 points the other day. For those who are unaware, they're playing Tennessee tonight, another ranked opponent. So we'll see what happens there. But Texas has proven, you know, they're legit. There's a reason why they're in the top 10, and they're going to come to Oxford looking, you know, to upset some fans like what's been going on previously in the season. So this is a make or break game. Ole Miss has gotten themselves back on their feet. Now it's time to see how are they going to respond.
Absolutely. And Ole Miss right now sitting at 13th in the net rankings and in the women's net rankings, unranked in the AP poll, unranked in the coaches poll as well. That's largely due to the fact that, like Zach said, no really marquee win right now. All those games close against ranked opponents like Alabama, like UConn, like USC, like NC State, close games, but didn't come out with the win in those games. Even if you pull out maybe just one of those games, I feel like maybe this team's probably sitting in the back 24th ranked right now. But really, if you're a follower of college basketball, you know the real deal rankings or the net rankings, that's where things get interesting. Things get interesting in the tournament seed rankings. Things get interesting as far as how they rank the power of the conferences and the power of the teams. And Ole Miss is sitting nicely at 13th right now. That puts them anywhere right now. If you look at bracketology, they're probably a 5 to 7 seed, which is seemingly where they've been at these past couple of years under Coach Joe since they've been winning playoff games. Now, top 16 seeds in this tournament get the home round in the second round, which is huge. And I'm pretty sure that's never happened here at Ole Miss. We never had a home playoff game in that second round since they've been doing the top 16 regional sites in the second round. So that would be huge for this Ole Miss team. That'd be huge for Coach Yo to get that publicity, even more publicity than she's been getting in these past couple of years since becoming a better team. And I think that's what I've talked about this with other people, other fans. I think that's what would get this Team 50 team over the hump. If they can host for like a second round playoff game in Oxford, you get fans to come out, you get people to show that your team will compete every year, and you pack 10,000 into the pavilion for a women's basketball game. And I think that's what they're building towards. I think that's something that's very capable, especially if you go in here and win on Sunday against Texas, and then obviously big games later in the season against LSU and South Carolina as well. This team plays the best. We've said it before in past years. This team plays the best down the stretch when it means the most. Coach Yo said it in recent press conferences. They're not done losing games yet, so don't give up on them. This Team 50 team, I think they're more talented than we've seen recent women's basketball teams at Ole Miss in a while, and they deserve a little bit more respect than I think they're what they're getting right now. And it's largely due to the fact that they're unranked. But if you're a follower of college basketball, go look at the net rankings, go look at all that, follow it along. Go support Coach O and Team 50 if you can, because this team, if they can get to that top 4 seed, those top 16 seeds in the tournament, they'll be hosting a playoff game here in Oxford come March.
Yeah, we missed the host playoff game with football, so, you know, we're hopefully going to have to make it up here. But like Cam said, you know, come out and support the ladies. I believe it's Sunday at 2 p.m. against a top 10 Texas team. You watch them tonight, like I said, play Tennessee, you know, give yourself a little scouting report of what to expect. But it's going to be fun. Come out and support, and, you know, let's go Rebs.
Absolutely. That'll be at 2 p.m. in the SJB on Sunday, like Zach said. Team 50 versus number 7 Texas. If they win that game, that's a big quad 1 win. I think Texas might be second in the quad rank in the net rankings right now. So you get a win over the second ranked team in the net, that'll probably boost you into the top 8 of the net. So I mean, that puts you in a really good spot if you can win this game heading into February, I believe. The women's schedule for college basketball is a little shortened, I think, compared to the men's schedule. So not as many SEC matchups as the men's games will have. But usually those women's games for Coach Shell are going to be on Thursday nights and Sunday nights. And they're going to be battling it out just like the men's side every game. SEC opponents are no joke, either side of basketball. Moving on to the men's talk of things, 16th in the AP poll and the coaches poll. Obviously, that was before last night's loss to Texas in the last seconds of the game, 63-62. 18th in the net. I believe they were 14th or 13th in the net before that loss last night. Still in a really good spot if you're Chris Beard and this Ole Miss team. Obviously, that loss last night isn't the best thing for you, especially in the fashion that you lost. So there's a lot of things to talk about in those last 4 minutes of that basketball game. There was a lot of things to talk about. And the officiating, that's a whole different story. But this was a game last night that the Ole Miss basketball team should have won, that you should have walked away with. In the last 2 minutes of the game, I believe, Zach, this team was up around 4 points, I think, and there was a chance to win the game. And the turnover by Padula seemed like a pivotal moment in that game for me late in that game. It seems like, going back to that state game, it seems like this team has a problem finding who they want to take the opportunity late in the seconds of the game.
And it's a shame because I thought, we kind of found that answer against Alabama. Now, I know Jamin Brakefield was only making free throws. He wasn't driving to the lane or making crazy threes or anything like that. But it feels like Brakefield needs to be the guy who has the most SEC experience, who started his damn career in a Duke Blue Devils uniform. This seems to be your guy who needs to take that last shot, especially when Matt Morrell, I think he had 5 points on the night. He couldn't make a three all night if you were watching. But, you have to find that, and it's got to be part of your identity, because that's how a lot of games are won in March, Cam. So, you got to start to figure that out sooner rather than later. But I did have some confusion. They drew up that play to inbound the ball, which eventually sent Davon Barnes to the free throw line, which he missed his first one. But Davon's a 65% free throw shooter, Cam. Juju Murray, Sean Padula, Jamin Brakefield, Matt Morrell, who just made his 2. Those are guys with not only higher free throw percentages, but guys who are in the game more, guys who have played a little longer bit of college basketball, who are a little more talented. No disrespect to Barnes. He's a great player. But the ball's got to be in their hands, man. I'm sitting there watching. I did have faith in Barnes. He's an incredible shooter. But it felt to me that there were other options where the ball should have gone. And then he misses the free throw. A&M goes down. They drill that shot for the win. Nothing really happened on Ole Miss's last possession. Yeah, it was tough to watch as a fan. It's shameful to say this, Cam, because I love this university. Ole Miss is a great place, but it felt just like the LSU football game, man. You're winning, and then the clock hits 0, and you look at the scoreboard, and somehow you're losing. And I don't even think the players really processed it. That was the first time Ole Miss lost the lead the entire night. So as a fan, you're just sitting there kind of shell shocked, like, what the hell just happened? But yeah, really tough game. Credit to Texas A&M. They hung around. I know Cam mentioned it, but yeah, it was 60-52 with 1:54 left to go. Ole Miss couldn't hit that last shot. No one had the ice in their veins, unfortunately. But that's what happens when you're not able to close out games against competitive opponents. We've seen how good the SEC is. And Missouri on Saturday is going to be just like that. But I want to get kind of your thoughts on how the ending unfolded there, Cam.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like there was much of a plan if you went down after Texas A&M gets possession there. It seemed like there must have been a discussion. And I'm not a coach. I'm not saying I would do any better. But it seemed like there was not much discussion of what happens if Texas A&M gets the ball and makes the shot, or Texas A&M ties the game. And I think looking back on it and the situation, I thought in the situation maybe Ole Miss fouls here and sends Texas A&M to the line because you haven't been able to stop them in at least the past 4 possessions. I think they were on a 10-2 run in the last about minute and a half of the game, and they pretty much put themselves in a position where you were like, oh snap, they're gonna win this game. And it wasn't really until the inbound play where you kind of just as a fan you're thinking like, okay, what are we doing right now? And I think everyone kind of just in the building kind of gasped for a little bit of air once Barnes missed the free throw. Obviously, Obaski hits the 3-pointer, and I think Ole Miss still has one timeout left. I'm not sure why it wasn't used. I'm not sure why it wasn't used in those last seconds. Again, I'm not a coach. I'm not trying to dog Chris Beard. I'm not saying I could do any better than Chris Beard. I think Chris Beard's a wonderful coach and does great with the players and has done a great job with this Ole Miss basketball team. But you have a timeout in those last seconds after Obaski just takes the air out of the building of 10,000 people. Why not use it? Why not use it? You had 9 seconds left. You could get the ball into someone's hands like Juju and Padula to maybe draw a foul. You could get Malik D in the paint to draw a foul maybe. But there was a lot of things, a lot of questions to be asked about those last 4 minutes that I think Chris Beard and the rest of the staff are definitely addressing to the players that I believe seeing TJ tweet about it last night. There's definitely a moments in that game that are going to be showed on film that, yep, that can't happen. That's the moment that you're going to look at those moments in the game. You're going to be like, that can't happen again. And I think that's probably what's going to happen when they watch that film, if they haven't already watched that film on that game. And it's not going to get any easier moving into Missouri. On Saturday. I mean, Missouri's been pretty hot lately. I think they're ranked 22nd in the country now, 26th in the net. Going to be another quad one opportunity on the road for Ole Miss, who's done pretty well on the road this year over the recent weeks. Obviously, the loss in Starkville, but I mean, close overtime loss in Starkville. But I think it's going to be another challenge this week in Missouri. I think it's a game that Ole Miss should win, but it's just a matter of what Ole Miss team shows up, I feel like.
Yeah, Missouri is a really, really fantastic team. Another program who's seemingly coming out of nowhere, just kind of like Ole Miss is in basketball, and similarly in football in a weird way too. They beat top 10 Florida on the road, I think a week or two ago. Then they beat Arkansas at home. They lost to Texas by 8 on Tuesday. This happens. Look around the SEC. Florida almost lost to South Carolina last night. But they're going to come back with some juice. They're coming back home after a loss in Austin. Damn well they're going to be ready to go and prepared to face Ole Miss, who is facing a lot of adversity right now, Cam. This is kind of a weird stretch. You go from beating Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and you look at social media about how good you are and how great this team is. Mississippi State in Starkville. It's like, okay, rivalry game. Things happen. We didn't start fast. We started slow, whatever. And now you drop this one to A&M in the span of a week. You're looking around, looking for all the answers that, no one seems to have. So you go to Missouri, it's going to be interesting. They're a great close-range shooting team. That's one of my notes here. Mark Mitchell and Tamar Bates are two guys I want to point out. Mitchell averages 13, shoots 50% from the field, and he's built like Malik Dia. So imagine Malik Dia averaging 13 a game, which he might, but just in a different fashion. The kid likes to shoot a lot. You get him inside, he's very effective too. And then Tamar Bates is similar. He shoots 51% from the field. He's 6'5". You'll see him more in a guard role. But Ole Miss has to be physical. And I thought they did a nice job rebounding against Texas A&M, who was very effective at getting offensive rebounds. But you got to continue to get rebounds, prevent second chance opportunities, especially on the road. My last thing here is forced turnovers. Missouri's averaging about 10 turnovers a game. And, you look at the stats from this Ole Miss defense, they caused 20 or more turnovers against Bama, 15 against State, and 20 or more against Texas A&M. And it generates a lot of that offense. So you have to go and take care of business on the defensive side of the floor, generate some offense through your defense, force some turnovers, and get back on track, Cam. It's going to be very important for Ole Miss to win this game. You host Texas next week because a very pesky team, and then Auburn, the game that everyone's been talking about. I've been seeing posts about Auburn that people are saying, oh, let us tailgate in the Grove. What? So fans are going to be there. It's going to be electric, but you have to take care of business here. You got to beat Texas and get yourself back into that upper 15 position, which I feel like this team should be against a very good Auburn team. But we'll stay here and talk about Mizzou a little bit more.
Absolutely. And just a little bit looking into the future to talking to Caleb Sailors last night. Shout out to Caleb Sailors. This is Mississippi teams have never had college game day come in basketball. there's a very good opportunity that Ole Miss can do that in the month of February with some pretty big matchups in February. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, if you're trying to maybe not as big as a basketball fan, you became a basketball fan this year, and you're starting to give up a little bit of hope after these 2 losses. If this team wins a couple more and makes a little bit more noise, they can bring some attention to the town. They'll bring in a lot of attention. The seats will be a lot more filled. It'll be a lot harder to get into these games for Ole Miss. So just be prepared for that. Going back to Missouri, I got 3 points on that as well as Zach. And just like you said, the rebounding it is a problem for Ole Miss and has been a problem for Ole Miss throughout the year. But the effort was there last night. And you could tell the effort was there last night on the rebounding. And you just simply got outmanned by a really good rebounding team in Texas A&M. And that's what Chris Pitt said in the press conference. You can't be upset about the rebounding that much. But if you look at the first half box score, Ole Miss was only down 4 rebounds in the differential. So, I mean, it was great in the first half. Obviously, A&M kind of got back to their identity in the second half and were crashing the boards heavy. I would like to see this Ole Miss team more crash the boards. It seems like at times you only have one guy crashing the board at times. I would like to see maybe one more guy crashing the board, maybe 2 more guys crashing the board for Ole Miss in the recent games to come, especially against Missouri. I would like to see Ole Miss not fall in love with the 3-point shot as much. I know that's a lot of the identity of this Ole Miss team. You have a lot of shooters on this Ole Miss team. But once a couple of guys start falling in love with the 3-point shot, you got Padula and Juju draining a couple, everyone falls in love with the 3-point shot, and everyone wants to shoot a 3-pointer. And that's not a knock on any of the guys. That's just how basketball works. Once you start hitting a couple, you start looking for those daggers. You start looking to go on those 15-0 runs where you hit 5 threes, and everyone thinks they're the 2015-2016 Warriors. Yes, the 2015-16 Warriors did ruin basketball, but that's besides the point. But I would like to see this team get back to more of their true identity, and that's playing defense and creating points off of that. This team plays really well in the fast break. This team plays really well when they're working fast through Matt Morrell, working fast through Padula, getting the ball in the paint to Malik Dia. And I don't think they did enough last night. Malik Dia was kind of taken out of the game by A&M at points, just like he was taken out of the game by Mississippi State. But if you're going to be a team that looks forward to that one guy in the paint like Malik Dia, which it seems like Ole Miss only has that one guy in the paint like Malik Dia, you have to find ways to make him more consistent. And that's not all Malik Dia. That's on other guys too. You have to find ways to get him the ball. You have to find ways to get him free in the paint and just find him when he's open. And it seemed like at times that Texas A&M made that tough last night for Ole Miss. They played defense really well on Malik Dia, just like Ole Miss played Wade Taylor really well last night on defense as well. But this is an Ole Miss team that needs to get back to more of their defensive identity, I feel like, and also getting to the free throw line. Obviously, last night's a whole different story. Officiating maybe wasn't the best last night, and Chris Pitt said it. There's not really much to say. He kind of paused a little bit before he kind of stopping himself. But this is the best officiating it's going to get in college basketball. I don't know if you've watched the Big Ten in recent years, Big Ten basketball, especially Purdue last year with Edey. Sometimes it seemed like those officials didn't know what to do. It seems like these are the best the SEC officials in the SEC call it the fair. It seemed like they were letting them play at most points last night. And then late in the game, it seemed like it leaned a little bit more towards A&M. And I know that the argument for Ole Miss is the 3-point shot isn't the best way to get a foul, which it isn't. You're not taking a lot of shots in the paint. You're not going to get a lot of free throws. But to Chris Beard's point last night, it's very hard to believe that there was a whole half of basketball played without an off-ball foul. And that's a story for other people to talk about and other people to evaluate in the officiating. But Ole Miss could have won that game despite the officiating last night, and that's the real story about that game last night. And I think if you want to win against Missouri, you got to get to the free throw line. You have to get back to your identity on defense, and you have to keep showing that effort and rebounding like you did in the first half against A&M.
Yeah, last thing here I really have, Cam, is on my notes, it says shooting 4 free throws in a game is not okay. It's not okay. It can't happen. You force 20 turnovers. You allow yourself to get so many offensive opportunities. You just aren't really drawing fouls. And I will say this, as someone in attendance, we briefly touched on it, but the refs were letting the boys play. There's no question. There's no question they missed calls against Ole Miss, and there's without a doubt they missed calls against A&M. But regardless, you got to find a way to get to the line, draw any sort of physical contact that you can. Because in these SEC tournament games in March Madness, the free throw at the end of the game, and not even that, the free throws throughout the game, typically are going to tell you who's going to win. It's free money right there, Cam. So you got to take advantage of that, and hopefully Ole Miss gets back to that with a better referee crew at Missouri.
Absolutely. Can't blame it all on the refs. Ole Miss could have won that game last night, like we said. Another quad one opportunity on the road against number 22 Missouri, 26th in the net rankings for Missouri. That's going to be at 5 p.m. on this upcoming Saturday, the day before the women's game. After that, they'll have Texas at home to end January. I believe that one's on the 29th. I think that's next Wednesday. You'll have that one at home. I think it's another late tip for Ole Miss fans, Ole Miss students. Be sure to get there early again. I'm sure they'll show up in crowds again as well for that one. And then the Blue Bloods to start February in Auburn and Kentucky. So it's not going to get any easier for this Ole Miss team. It's a battle every week in the SEC. So it seems like right now, if you want to get your wins in, definitely do it early in the season, because there's no telling if you get on a bad stretch, you might lose a couple and be out of it for good. And I think that's what happened to this Ole Miss team last year in the middle of the season last year, especially at the beginning of SEC play, where they just kind of pushed themselves out of it. But they're right in the mix of it right now. I think tied like 5th or 6th right now in the SEC after that loss. Everyone, it seems like 4-2 or 5-1 or 3-3, So this is a very stacked SEC this year, and this is definitely a year that Ole Miss can find themselves on the top. But I think that's all we got for you. That's all you got, Zach?
That's all I got, brother.
I think that's all we got for you guys today. So make sure to tune into the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.